Welcome to the Developer Spotlight on the Full Dive Gaming Podcast. In the Developer Spotlight, we sit down with VR industry professionals. This week, Jay and Lip are here with the developer of a game or a meditation or something actually called Zengence. Take aim with every breath. Ryan, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
It is great to be here. And while we're saying thanks, we got to thank our sponsor of the podcast. They've been supporting us a long time, Asterion Products. If you want some amazing VR merch, go to AsterionProducts.com. Use code FULLDIVE to save $5 off any order. And Ryan, for the listeners out there who somehow haven't heard of it, do you want to give us a quick rundown on what Zengence is exactly?
Yeah, and if you're all right, I'll maybe even back up a little bit on what DeepWell is, and we'll kind of go from there.
Do it.
I mean, DeepWell is a group that's been working for 3 or 4 years to kind of bridge this gap between media and medicine with this idea that gaming, and I mean commercial gaming, can be really good for you. We have a lot of data in the back end. And we've seen a lot of people try to make games good for you, the gamification kind of thing, which has not landed where we wanted it to go, whether you're Therapeutics, out of business, Achilles, SPAC'd and now sold. And, we've seen this kind of fundamentally big disconnect that DeepWell was looking at, which is when you look at games that are really, really good for you, they're not serious games. The ones that have been really killing it, especially in mental health, are commercial games. When I mean killing it, I'm talking about Mario being 4 times more effective than a talk therapy or a drug on major depressive disorder. And this is data. This is hard data coming out of real science. Or, 60% of folks that played Tetris after a serious car accident did not have post-traumatic stress disorder compared to the control group that didn't play.
What?
And folks went into a hospital and nobody was like, these weren't the people that were hurt. These were here's your clipboard, fill out your situation. So they had 2 kind of working groups. The control group just filled out the accident report. They got a certain percentage of them got post-traumatic stress disorder because it's scary to be in a car accident and go to the hospital. The other half of the cohort played 20 minutes of Tetris, were asked to think about that game, while they played the game, think about the accident. And then they filled out the report. And that cohort had 62% less post-traumatic stress disorder. This goes on and on. So there's about 200 really solid studies that show us that these games are very, very good for us, which is pretty contrary to what everybody believes.
I was just thinking I need this data to share with my mom.
Yeah, this is great. Moms love me when I do this stuff. They also love me when I start saying, duration of gameplay can be pretty long and still pretty good for you too. And we can't hit the 9 to 12 hour timeframes. And if you're putting on diapers to play, there's conversations to be had to get you out of the basement. But the data showing the first 3 hours of play is actually progressively better for you. For 3 to 6, we would definitely say, okay, you haven't done anything better for yourself, but you haven't done anything worse. After that point, it varies by person until it gets to the place of life intrusion. And the only other kind of predictive model will be if you're using the game to hide away from something that you should be taking care of. If that's your homework, or if it's a mental health concern, or if it's, physical health, well, that's not going to work out so well. But generally, playing is really good for you. And it shouldn't surprise us because play in general is about the most sort of neurostimulating thing we can do. It gets us making neural pathways. Gamers are amazing as far as how many neural pathways they have. Parts of their brain are bigger than folks that don't play, especially like the hippocampus. Which kind of suggests that you consolidate these memories and land them in a place of new behaviors. And so gaming is pretty great for you, but that's not the rap it got. And then, we had this whole other part of the problem, which was gamification. Which is like folks wanted all of that attractiveness that you get from games. You wanted to induce people to do things. And so they were like, well, here's this thing. It's not really fun. Gamify it. And they would hand that over, usually not to a master game developer, because a master game developer is like, I'm not taking that gig. So they would, get the person they could to do it, probably a little bit more junior, wouldn't let them change all the stuff that, about the kind of core mechanics that are sitting there. So all that was really left for these gamifiers to do was put the secondary game mechanics around things: badging, scoring, social, none of which was that play loop that you just can't stop doing. None of it had a story or narrative that you couldn't come out of it. Many of them didn't induce flow, didn't get you to the place where you were losing track of time and having a good time. So then you don't really have any of the magic. You don't really have any of the medicine, right? So that, we had the gamification fundamental issue. And then the next big problem we had about getting games used as medicine or as treatments for mental health is people don't, as we said, don't believe it's necessarily good for them. And then you've got the folks that kind of govern this world, the FDA, and the folks that pay you to do this kind of stuff, reimbursement. The FDA wants you to build all software as a medical device. It's called SAMD, the same way you would build that software if you were building pacemaker. That's how they came up with these ideas a long time ago. That means they want a dedicated piece of hardware, which is not what we have, right? If we're in mobile, there's 1,100 different active Android phones at any given time, 20 to 30 good Apple devices running at any particular time. And they're updating all the time too. They have iOS updates and all that kind of stuff. All this makes the FDA really anxious and upset because the verified and validated system is changing, and that's not what they want. So we had that next fundamental disconnect, which was the stuff that was best for you, that was really, really good for you, didn't fit in the paradigm. So if you go to a game developer and go, okay, here's the thing. We want you to make it once. We want you to make it for a piece of hardware that never changes. And we don't ever want you to update it again. And we want it to be a great game. I mean, the very nature of why we play for that. We're always looking for that next update. We're always looking for things to evolve. So that was broken too. So gamifying wasn't working. The system wasn't working. And the third thing that kind of killed paratherapeutics is there was no money to be had on the other side of it. So if you didn't gamify and you made something that was really good for somebody and you managed to run the gauntlet and you got it through the FDA, now it's all locked down, there was no one on the other side to reimburse it. All of that has started switching out the next couple minutes. So I had to tell you that whole thing to tell you what DeepWell really is someone who is working to patch that issue. So a couple of really major things have happened. There's a group called the Digital Therapy Alliance. They're a lobby group and a trade alliance, and they basically are a trade association. They've been working for digital therapeutics to get reimbursement, and they did it. So starting in 2025, digital therapeutics for mental health are going to get reimbursed, and they're going to get reimbursed, and the doctors are going to actually get paid to prescribe them, to follow them along, follow the patient along, check in every month, initiate the treatment and all this kind of stuff. So now digital therapeutics and media potentially have a place to get paid. Now that big barrier is the FDA. How are you going to get that game that's they're going to want to lock it down. They're going to want to do all that. So that's what DeepWell was working on, is being that translational engine. So about 3 years ago, we started with the FDA. We said, listen, if we give you a plugin, an engine of sorts that we could attach to this media that allows the media to have the free range that it needs to be as flexible as it has to be media, we locked down the therapeutic kernel here, could we agree that these games could be attached to and become part of a medical device? And for a long time, the FDA said, I don't like that. And the big news is 3 weeks ago, they said, okay. So we are now sitting on this thing that allows us to add this therapeutic engine to the games without altering the gameplay necessarily. You can put the therapeutic engine right in the middle of the gameplay. That'll get us to Zengence in the moment. You can put it off the side, or you can associate the therapeutic engine with a bunch of games so that are unaltered at all of which turns you into reimbursable medicine and brings a whole new commercial channel to game developers, right? So they can start thinking to themselves, I want access to these dollars. I want to go at it this way. And it's going to be really cool. It's not a little bit of money over time. I mean, gaming is almost a $300 billion annual industry. Sadly, mental health is a $3 trillion annual industry. So as much as we would like to see that number be lower, there is a large amount of dollars available to these game developers if they want to build these games.
Wow, I feel healthy right now. I feel like my gaming has made me a better person. So I want to thank that real quick.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to know about that depending on what you're playing. I mean, the next work that DeepWell's been doing for a long time is showing you what is good and what is bad for you. And it turns out there's not really a game mechanic that is bad for you. First person shooting, really, really good for you. Action games in general, really, really good for you. Here's the stuff that's bad for you. It's the stuff that the game designers and the folks I work with don't want to do anyways. It's the somewhat predatory monetization schedules, right? It's banging you every 5 seconds for this or that. It's the free and unmoderated chat that's usually tied back again to the monetization schedules, right?
I was thinking multiplayer.
Yeah, multiplayer. So doing cooperative stuff in a game is amazing for you. Playing Call of Duty cooperatively, great for you. But if you get a steady stream of hate speech in your head when you're heavily dopaminergic and that's your only social network, well, you're really suggestible in those moments, and you might start thinking what you're hearing is really a good idea. So we've gotten really confused between what media can and can't do that's good for you and bad for you. So what that does, that's amazing, is it kind of opens up takes us back to the golden age of gaming, right? Where if you're going to go out and pitch a game and get that thing built, you've got to get backers. And those backers are going to ask you the same question over and over again. After you tell them that you've got an amazing game that's going to be, heavily engaging and a great concept and all the rest of these things, the next question is, how are you getting paid? And if you're not talking to them about mobile and you're not talking to them about free to play with a whole economy of microtransactions, you don't get funded. So all of these amazing experience designers have been pulled into this arena where they pretty much have to build Skinner boxes and loops to just monetize you. They're not going to have to do that anymore. They could go the path of this FDA clearance and get themselves access to being able to sell the games this way and get up a whole new monetization stream. The other thing that's really cool about that monetization stream is it's not so hit driven. If you can help people, it's not, are we you the best game of 2024? So if you look at the medical devices I've built in the past and things I've done, that's years and years and years of revenue once you get cleared. So if you put this all together now, we've built this engine that can attach gaming and other media to a new revenue source, and it can extract all the goodness that it's doing and get people paid for doing the goodness. The catch is you got to be really good at making games. This doesn't work for gamification. If you look at all the games that have been amazing that I was telling you about, Mario being super effective, Animal Crossing, Call of Duty's really good, and Tetris is out of this world. What's the common thing when I tell you all those games? What do you find a commonness there? They're not the same genre. They weren't built in the same time frame. Do you understand what the common theme might be there?
I don't know. For me, with video games, I find there's always some sort of like sense of reward initiative where you feel that dopamine hit for getting whatever the reward is, whether or not it's furniture or a new fish in Animal Crossing, a new item in Zelda, new star in Mario, or a kill.
Yeah, all those games you're listing are nailing it too. So you're getting it. You're getting around it from the side. I'm going to come at it right at. They're all created by the masters. These are folks that know how to do exactly what you're telling about. They know how to get deeply involved in the storytelling, draw you into the narrative, give you agency and control in places that make you feel like I'm in control of the situation. And then they're really good at managing the challenge conditions. So you're getting that dopaminergic hit at the right time. It can't be that you're winning all the time or it doesn't mean anything for you to win. It can't be that you're losing all the time or you want to get out of there. And they're really good at managing that situation. That turns out to be exactly the same thing that makes a game super therapeutic and really powerful. So this isn't going to work if it's your first game, unless you just happen to be one of those savants that your first game is an amazing game, right? So it's good that there's going to be good dollars behind it and good opportunities because it's going to take people that really know what they're doing to get it done.
Man, I was not expecting all of this. This is deep stuff here. I think it's really exciting, and I think it's cool that like you're actually putting some time and energy into showing the benefits of video games, because it's only recently that like I've actually had people talk about self-care and video games in the same sentence. And it's for someone who grew up on video games, who played them when I was stressed or played them when things were going bad at home. Like it's still my go-to. I find like even my wife knows if I'm playing video games a lot, all of a sudden she's like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, are you stressed out about something?" And I'm like, "Oh crap, maybe I am."
Absolutely. I mean, and with the exception of using them for escapism, like we were talking about before, it is, you probably have found your medicine, right? And the other thing that's really important to understand about humans and our brains is that we're perception engines. We're not ones and zeros, yes and no's. We're kind of maybes on almost everything. So let's say that game is really working well. And then your wife is kind of like, you've got to deal with this problem in its entirety. If you're not hiding in the game, you are dealing with the problem. You're processing it through that play. You're reaching out to a community who's supporting you. You're accomplishing something, and you're giving your brain time to process through whatever it is that is kind of, broken up your consciousness in a way that you can't do what you want to do. And so when people say things to you like, "Oh, you know what? This is a really big problem. It's probably time for you to come out of the basement, stop doing what you're doing, and go do X, Y, Z." Sometimes that's the answer, but a lot of times you're taking someone's accommodation away from them. And if you do that at the wrong time, and then you give them the next accommodation, let's say you say, "Okay, you're going to go get some talk therapy. We're sending you to this doctor." Talk therapy works about 20% of the time. Now, it could be as good as 60% of the time, but it depends who's delivering the therapy. So you're down in your basement. It was working out. You were feeling better. Then you go into but then everybody leaves you with the perception of, oh, what you were doing was just a coping mechanism. You go off to the doctor. It doesn't feel as good. You don't blame the doctor and you don't blame the video game. You start to blame yourself. You land in this place where you're like, I'm only good for playing video games. That's the only time I'm comfortable. And you don't understand the true mechanism, which is you were involved in a treatment stream. It was helping you. So another really important thing we're doing is getting folks and getting doctors to understand that, look, there are excessive gaming. There are things that we all know what addiction looks like when somebody's out of control. They stop going to school, they stop working, live on Cheetos, sit in diapers. We know what that, but that is a small percentage of people that game, right? The vast majority of us, this really is, we find coping mechanisms and we find the opportunity to get better and improve through doing these things. And we got to legitimize that, especially now when mental health is kind of in the toilet, right? So we don't have a lot of alternatives. The reason these reimbursement codes are coming up, the reason that DeepWell was able to work with the FDA to get this thing done is the government here and really CMS, the people that do Medicaid, Medicare, all these folks have pretty much decided if they can't lean on the MDs and digital therapeutics to get this job done, they're not really sure what to do about mental health. It is not getting better post-COVID. It's still getting worse. Yesterday, the Surgeon General let the United States know that it is hazardous for your health to have a child.
Hey, I would believe that.
It was obvious for
unless
those of
it's
us
like
that
a
have
fur
it, but
child. Unless it's a fur child.
yeah, I mean, but they've never had to warn things like this. And what's happening is it's getting to the point where pretty soon it's going to be hazardous to your health to be an American, right? Like we're heading, we got 30-40% of folks with diagnosable stress, anxiety, and depression. If you're at that diagnosable level, that means you have money and access to a doctor and you're not subclinical, so that starts to suggest if you add the whole society up, we might be running at 70%. We're losing doctors, not gaining them. We definitely don't have enough psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers. So here we are staring at this amazing mechanism of action, over 1,000 studies that show that it is really, really effective. And now what we've just got to do is figure out how to use it. Right? And like anything else, powerful things can harm too. So anytime I'm doing a therapy design or figuring out how, if something is therapeutic, I look at the boundary condition. On the boundary conditions, I find harm. Do it all the time, harm. Don't do it at all, harm. That's how you start to understand something has. And then you look for in between there how much potentially it could be therapeutically used. Video games on the fringes, if you throw in those deep monetization loops, free and unmoderated chat to the point that people are being treated, vulnerable populations are being treated really poorly, none of that's good for you, right? Use very addictive means to separate people from their money, all that kind of stuff. Those are the problems. But gaming itself, for the most part, pretty amazing what it does for you.
It is amazing because if I go into an app, paid or free, whatever, if I log in there and I see some ridiculously priced transaction in the game, I instantly feel bitter, like they're just trying to cheat me. And it makes me not want to play the game at all, even if it's like a huge, big game I was excited about. And I'll give you an example because Nintendo has done this. And honestly, and so did Elder Scrolls back in the day. But Nintendo did it where I bought the Breath of the Wild DLC and I was so excited because they gave me great Mario Kart 8 DLC. So I had this huge expectation. And as soon as that DLC came out, I never thought of the game again because I was so disappointed by the DLC that the game that I had already put 150 hours into that I'd stopped playing months ago, I could never go back and enjoy again because they set this like bitter notion on me with those types of like predatory types of things. And I mean, another thing for me is tutorials. If a game has annoying tutorials, might as well just not even, I'll just delete it before I can get through the tutorials.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of those things, if you think about it, what do they do? But they really, they break the fourth wall, right? They take you out of the stream of consciousness that you want to be in while you're playing. They take you out of flow. They break everything up in its entirety. I mean, when we're playing these games, we are these characters. We are doing these things until you're the guy that has to reach for your wallet. Like,
Yeah.
you don't really feel like I'm a Formula One driver right now. I feel like I'm a whale, and nobody wants to be a whale. And that's also really true of the therapeutics, right? The reason these commercial games are working so well is if you can spot the part of the game that's treating you, that's the record scratch, right? Which is going to bring us to Zengence and what's really kind of interesting and cool about Zengence. How is Zengence going? Terribly, which is exactly what it was supposed to do. So we had been fighting this battle to explain to people that you could not make the mechanic overt that you were using. And we were kind of battling that back and forth and needing to get data to show the agency that was important, that we had to let people choose what they use. So when Zengence was in conception and being tested and go testify and stuff like that, it was ranking a 4.4 to 4.6 out of 5. We didn't even tell people it was therapeutic. It's just a rhythm shooter on rails. You're a magic guy and you're going to town, and at some points you can just bullet hell, and other times you got to be really, really careful and preserve to get through the levels. There was lots to figure out, but not too much. A great soundtrack and things were going great. If you wanted to, you could use the biofeedback mechanism in there. And if you in that time, you were this mage. And if you chose to hum while you played, you became super powerful in a way that you didn't have to be so precise or on rhythm with the shooting. And it was a metaphor for life. You're running down this road full of troubles. You call those troubles to you, and then you have your choices. If you want to be that extrinsic fighter, you fight them away like there's no tomorrow. Perfect. If you wanted to be more the introverted about it and you didn't want to you really master the environment, but you wanted to master yourself, you could start toning. That would set a breath mechanic for you, and you powered up really big. And then everything you did do was super powerful. And it had a great intrinsic haptic to it, too, because if you're dodging and weaving and moving through that game and trying to breathe, you feel that thing. And when it was your choice, you felt like this mage. And would it make sense that as someone that's drawing on magic from my own body, I would feel it in my lungs, all the rest of it? It was amazing. But to get through our point, we were dealing with the FDA and it was getting a little tricky and stuff like that. We didn't roll that one out. What we rolled out was something that forced you to breathe through the entirety of the game. And that didn't go as well. The metrics don't look nearly as good as in testing, which was exactly what we needed it to do to finish this clearance that week. So now we've made our point. Jeffrey Sang, who's like, the guy that's in charge of all this, I don't know if you've looked him up or you know who he is, but I mean, this is, 25 years of gaming. He's CrowdStar, a lot of the games that came, attached back to Facebook. He's in the Marvel universe as a director. He did Iron Man games, he did Star Wars games, and then he moved into mobile. And among other things, he figured out how to do these games for women's mobile that they love, Covet, Fashion, Design Home. This is all Jeffrey Sang, right? This is our CEO. He's also our chief product guy. So he was brave as hell. I mean, we all know what it's like for your reputation to shove something out there, but he wanted this so bad, put it out. And I knew he was doing it. So if you look back at May, people were like, what do you think of this release that's going on? I was in Mexico. I was living in Mexico at the time. I'm like, he's very brave. I couldn't tell what he was doing, but he essentially threw it out to make that ultimate. So now he's going to flip it around.
Admittedly, I did play one of those fashion games that was on Netflix, and it was extremely fun. I have no shame. It was a lot of fun picking the outfits. It was like the character creator mode, but you got to pick the outfits. So if he made that one,
he's one of the masters. I mean, that those two games rolled up to a glue sale for like what, 200 million, and then to EA for 2 billion, and they're still rolling today. People love that stuff. So I mean, he knows what he's doing, but in this case, he's like, if I got to make the point, and he couldn't. When people would argue with him and me and say, look, are you sure you can't just gamify the hell out of a breath mechanic? It's like, we think we can, right? We think we could make it an option within a game. And then if people choose it through their own agency, we think they're going to use it. Because it's kind of fun, actually, but nothing's fun when you're forced to. And then the way we're kind of neurologically wired, just like the problem you were having with being asked to pay for something that didn't feel fair or right, when we can identify, when the fourth wall gets broken and you can identify the therapeutic, you don't like it. I don't care what you love. Like, I love tennis. I love tennis until the tennis pro comes out to give me a lesson. I love tennis. I used to be a ski racer. I loved to race. I did not like running gates all day long while someone was yelling at me and pointing at it. Your brain is just set up different. There is that 1%, those people that drive us crazy. They go to the gym every day and they get A+ on everything. They like all that stuff. But the vast majority of us, we want to play, and that's when we have a good time. And then you can understand if you build the kind of culture in a game where I want to be really good at this. And as a result of being really good at this, I got to figure out this new toning mechanic, this weird thing. Well, maybe you'll pick your way through it, especially if you can still get a really high score just by being a great rhythm player. But then you're like, hey, man, kind of a cheat here is to make these sounds a little bit. Well, that's a very different way into it. So, I mean, Zengence did exactly what we wanted. It was the example we needed, and I can't wait to flip it and go get the data on it. So you can expect around the time people will be hearing this. So obviously, I imagine it's past September 11th if you're hearing me talk, because we're not releasing this till then. So don't be bad.
Tomorrow.
What do you mean? We're live right now.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right. Well, I'm going home because that's the end of my time at DeepWell. But, I can't wait to, and then you'll see it kind of iterate from there. And we got some really neat thoughts about what we're going to do with it. But DeepWell's not a content company. We're not going to keep making games. We're going to empower folks that make games to get access to these reimbursement codes, get new channels in, help them make the game in a way that's super fun and super good for people, and get many of those in the hands of folks that are having issues with mental health. That's what we're really up. That's who we are. That's what we're doing.
So I'm curious. So Zengence is basically a game that is a shooter where your movement's sort of controlled with your breathing. And I'll be honest, Jay sends me all sorts of random games. This was his girlfriend or his wife, Nat, that sent me this. And
which one was it? His girlfriend or his wife? Who?
Sorry, his wife. My bad. But anyways, I get this game and I have no idea what it is, and I hit install, and it's the middle of the night. And I'm just chilling out, and I just put on a game, ready to go to bed. And I'm like, okay, of course I should expect whatever she's decided I should play is going to be something unique and weird. And I put it on, and I was like, oh, I don't really understand what's happening. Now, I'm just I will just do whatever I want with games. I'll skip tutorials. I'll do whatever mode I want. So I just put on my own custom music to just fiddle with it. And I got the breathing down, and that was all I needed. Just listening to classic rock music and just breathing and watching the environment change with my breaths. And I was like, there you go, $30 in that's money well spent. That's all I needed. I didn't even
We
need
need
the
a
shooting.
lot more of you.
I didn't even need the shooting.
Your own
No
game in the
controllers.
game.
Yeah, no controllers, no nothing. Just give me my music headphones and just breathe in and out. And I was having the best experience. So
I think you're not wrong, and they are working on versions of that where you just kind of go along and hum along or breathe along to the music. The thing that I find that's really so I love that. I love it the way that we had it set up when we were playing it. I now make these humming noises while I'm playing all the way through it. I'm sure it's ridiculous. Like if you can get video of me doing this, it's ridiculous. If you go in there, you'll see Ryan DeepWell. I got some pretty serious high scores, and it's like, for a 50-year-old guy, come and get me. Let's see what you can do, because there really are 4 mechanics in there. There's a precision mechanic, there's a rhythm mechanic. The precision mechanic has a lot to do with you notice these things are coming at you, you're dodging and weaving, which kind of a little hint, Jeffrey won't like me giving away all his secrets here, but the closer you are, more precise you are to dodging those things versus really weaving in and out, actually helps increase your score. So does obviously shooting on time. We've got that. So we got a motion component, a precision component of both shooting and dodging, and then you've got the vagal nerve stimulator, the breath mechanic, and it's playing off of you relative to how you're doing these things. So if you get too flaily, it's going to be a little bit more careful with you as well, because we don't want you overstimming either, right? So it kind of balances back and forth between all the 4 mechanics that you're doing. The only one anybody ever pays attention to, because it's new, is the breath mechanic. They're like, I'm humming my way through this thing. It's a little weird. The people that love it. The people that don't. It's therapeutic whether you hum or not. So that's the beauty of it. Right? It's going to work for you just like a lot of those other games. And so too is Pistol Whip. If you don't like ours, go get Pistol Whip. That's another great way to, get a lot of motion in there, get a lot of extra gaming going, and really knock your stress level down. So Beat Saber is wonderful for it. There's great data on that as well. But throwing the vagal nerve stimulator in there does have a calming mechanism. And you start to learn when you make those sounds, which you can only make when you're breathing out, you are setting your vagal nerve in a way that it is suppressing some of your autonomic function so you calm down. What's cool about that is if you learn to do that in a game environment where you're truly in flow, your subconscious learns to do it in other places as well. So I probably have 200 hours of that thing doing the therapy design. And my kids know now, if I'm sitting at the table and everything's getting crazy and I start going, they know I'm getting a little, pissed off. I'm starting to sit down. I catch myself doing it now without realizing I'm doing it. So that's precognition, where I'm already kicking in before I have the thought of I'm upset, before I say the thing I don't want to say, before I go off in the wrong direction and getting stressed out. I just start this calming mechanism that I've picked up because I played the game a lot of times. So it definitely works. It's really cool, but forcing it isn't cool.
Mm-hmm. Smart. You're sneaking up on people in a way. And an interesting thing that I found when I tried it versus not my wife / girlfriend, we'll clear that up, both. What I found was I was really like struggling to figure out the game. She got in it because she had a singing background. She has breathing background. She like blasted through levels and got these crazy scores. And I was like, did you really just beat that level on your first try? Because it took me like 6 tries to figure out how to get through the first level and get the score high enough. And she was just cruising through it. So I was like, there's something here about people who have breath training that they're doing really well in this game.
Well, and the funny thing is we got great tutorials for it if you choose to use them, but they're not in there right now because they're for the way we wanted the game to be played. And then last minute, realizing we were in this, I'm going to call it the fight for our life here with the agency, we released it the other way. And so there's not a lot of tutorialization. It's out there. A couple of people are like half baked. I'm like, it's a little half baked. But, so I always say at the moment, we didn't release a game. We released a lab. It did what we needed to do, and now we'll move it over to the next things we want it to be, and I hope people enjoy it a lot more. But it'll probably be the last title you see from us for a while, because we're going to be much more feeling like a publisher, much more feeling like an enabler, and a little bit of an engine and platform, to help folks get access to this monetization. We'll definitely help with the games and help integrate, but the games won't need to necessarily have that vagal nerve stimulation and stuff like that. That kernel just needs to be somewhere in proximity to your gameplay. So you see that actually in 2 ways in Zengence. It's right in the gameplay. There's also a room you go off to if you want to calm down. And that room will give you some power of some pearls that'll allow you to take a couple extra hits. That's another way that it can be incorporated. Or, that the whole kind of mechanism can be incorporated in a way that it's sitting as a platform with a whole bunch of unaltered games attached to it. And then it'll sort of recommend things. Come on in. How you doing today? Who are you? Oh, okay, go play this. Go get some Tetris in. Right, come on back. How you feeling now? Okay, what do you think about going and doing a few hours of Animal Crossing, stuff like that? So it's going to work more like that and less like forcing anybody to do any sort of thing.
That sounds really, really awesome. I'm curious now because you're sort of doing this publishing thing. We have tons of developers that watch these kinds of things that are engulfed in the VR industry. How can they connect with you or your studio to get involved in this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so deepwelldtx.com is the way to get rolling. If you can imagine, we're a little busy for just a second and we're just wrapping up. So give us a couple of weeks, please, because it's coming in pretty hot and heavy. And we're not immediately going to have publishing dollars to support folks and stuff like that. We're going to have this kernel and the ability for you to get access to reimbursement. But we're not going to be the place where you bang on the door, we give you $500,000. We're more like the kind of place where you bang on the door and we make sure your game is the kind of game that would work well for this. And then we get it hooked up to these reimbursements. And they're kind of cool. The first level of reimbursement is through HSA or FSA spending. Do you guys have HSA accounts? You know what those are?
Mm-hmm. I'm Canadian. So.
Spending? He's in Canada, so.
Oh, okay. Well, that's where I'm from. So yeah, in the States, right? I mean, folks don't have the kind of reimbursement we have. So they have these flex spending and health spending accounts. Well, as soon as you put this kernel in the game, any game, it now becomes eligible for that. So it's a medical device. So you can go ahead and claim it back against your HSA account, which most people get about $6,500 a year. We're trying to find out right now because we just got this cleared 3 weeks ago. We even think there's going to be a hardware component in there. So if you didn't have an Oculus, yeah, right. As long as you're buying it, I mean, you'd have to have a diagnosable condition. But in our case, we're cleared for mental health related stress and hypertension, otherwise known as just about everybody. So if you can show that you have that and you need this, at the very least, the game is going to be covered. The media is going to be covered, but it's looking like you're going to be able to get your hardware covered. Little harder when we get to mobile because you can use the phone for so many other things. But even there, I think you're probably going to see a bit of it. And then, we're looking at streaming services and stuff like that too. We can do this, you guys, with audio. We can do it with video as well. And so you can imagine maybe getting part of your Netflix covered in a month or these sorts of things as well, provided you're using this part of it. And the only difference would be like a mental health tab. You go in and there will be the thing in there that would be more therapy related. Use it if you like. Again, we're not going to force it, but it's also going to start recommending to you titles within subscription that you have saying, look, give this a try, give this a try. And maybe it'll throw a little something at you too. Like, while you're watching this, think about this. Like something very simple. Like if you've got something that's been a little hard on you, is a little bit traumatizing, you're not sleeping about something, while you're playing this game, think about that a little. That's about the extent. It's not very heavy-handed. Go play the game in the way you want. It's probably what we do anyways, most of us, right? When we're stressed out, we stop thinking, and then at some point we start thinking again too.
So go talk to your doctor, people. Tell them you need a MetaQuest for medical purposes because you're going to do treatment through gaming. There's even options for actual therapy through VR. So you can get it. You can get it covered on your insurance, and then before you know it, you're going to be hanging out with us in VR on your insurance's dime.
Absolutely.
That's wild.
But you gotta have Zengence on there first, because
Zengence is step one.
There's going to have to be at least one thing in there that is a medical device, and it doesn't. There's a couple other things that are running around. Applied VR is another version of this. They manage pain for you, and that's getting reimbursed right now too. So it doesn't have to be DeepWell, but it's happening. It's starting to be that you can get this stuff covered, which is really cool.
The conversation has changed so much around mental health and self-care over like the last decade. It seems like people are starting to realize like those moments where you're sitting there, you're relaxing, you're doing what it is, whether that's gaming, meditation, like that's necessary as part of your life. You aren't wasting your time.
Absolutely. You're not wasting your time. And I mean, we're talking about it more, guys, because it's a bigger problem than it's ever been, right? Like, we were in a health emergency for 50 years around mental health, working on this stuff with light therapy and neurostimulators and all sorts of stuff. We've been in a scary, dark time before COVID, right? It was a mental health dumpster fire that then became like, more like mental health napalm. We're not getting better right now. We're getting worse. If you're like a teen from grade 8 to grade 12, we're talking about 50% of folks are struggling with things like worthlessness, right? There's a loneliness epidemic, which games can really, if you could trust the communities you were going into. And that's a big if in gaming, but we know the places, where there is that right social contract where you walk in there and people are treating each other properly, right? That doesn't mean that I'm not all talking sunshine and rainbows here either, but I'm talking, let's keep the hate speech out of there. Let's not dox anybody. That doesn't seem like a good way to help their mental health. You get away from Gamergate kind of stuff and just land at camaraderie. That is amazing for you, right? So there's so much that gaming can do here. It's not just the gameplay mechanics, but the socialization, all the stuff that, I was playing games from the time I was 8 years old, which was on machines that are hilarious to think about today. And by the time I was 12, I had a bulletin board system. That's dating me a little bit, but just because I liked hanging out there, I felt like I was seen there, connected there, right? That it was a really important community for me. So if we can point people to those right communities, then they can experience what you guys understand. You've been in those communities. You know what the ones feel like that you don't want to be in any longer. Yeah. I ran a couple clans in Clash of Clans, and I'm not going to do that again. Oh. But it was like running a business. But then there's these other places again, Animal Crossing, a lot of stuff that we see that happens in Minecraft. But it still also can be the right group of people playing Call of Duty, right? That's all about who you're talking to while you're playing. If it's the right folks, you're getting a ton of good value out of it.
For sure.
So one of my concerns, which is just sort of about the medical thing, is, or more observations, I would say, is that with the new generation of kids, it's all about TikToks. They're not watching movies like my generation where I put on a movie as a kid. They're watching 5-second hit, 5-second hit, 5-second hit.
Yeah.
And if I'm playing a video game, especially when I was younger, there's not a hit every 5 seconds. You earn the hit. It's a reward for doing well in the game. And I feel like that's a healthy way to potentially take this generation that is hit, 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 and sort of fix them in this sort of longer term thought process thing. I don't know how you feel about that, because in the same sense, I think Fortnite or games like Fortnite are giving people so many constant hits. It's the same problem again.
The piper is coming to be paid, right? You're going to end up working with DeepWell or something like that that's going to help you get towards FDA and reimbursement, or you're going to live in the world of the FTC. The Federal Trade Commission is locking this stuff down quick. I'll tell you what I think TikTok. I think TikTok is the most predatory successful game ever. I think social media go get a like, take over the world, get a bunch of followers. And it's just that it's overly dopaminergic to the point that you're living for that hit, right? And you get entrained to the point that if you're not feeling that all the time, if you're not feeling these high degrees of emotional swing and push, then you don't feel like you're doing really anything. And that's going to get fixed, and it's going to have to get fixed. Right. So we can't get to be a society that needs to be constantly, in that kind of mode, where you're basically running on self-generated cocaine while you bang on TikTok, right, all day long. So that's an example of how powerful media can be and where it's gone too far in a direction that needs to be pulled back. So, Surgeon General, he was just all over social media. And that's kind of how regulation works. I know in gaming, you guys haven't seen this, but in medical device and aviation, defense, the places that I did most of my work, it starts with the Surgeon General warning everybody. That gets society and Congress comfortable with the idea something has to be done. Then Congress starts moving, which is what's happening right now. Rules get made and then they don't get enforced because there's not an enforcement branch. That's kind of like what happened with Europe and all of the, predatory monetization. And then they start fining people. And if you look at Europe right now, there's a couple $2 billion in fines that have gone on it. If you look at what the FDA did, is the FDA said to the FTC, we can't police all this crazy wellness stuff. And so in the beginning of 2024, they did something that they hadn't done since the nutraceutical days, like when Herbalife was running around and all that. They turned over regulatory authority to the FTC and said, guys, if it's not a medical device, would you please go clean this up, because we can't keep up with all the crazy crap that's going on. And the FTC has put out about 1,000 warning letters. I'm sure they've made a couple $1 billion. They are not a group to tangle with. You actually need their permission to sue them back when they come after you. And they don't say yes, from what I'm
I wouldn't imagine.
I would imagine so.
I mean, they will take a company from here to gone, and that stuff is coming. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that things have gone too far, and now we're going to have to pull it back. And there is a right amount. So that's that same thing I'm talking about, those boundary conditions. None of this, you're not stimulated. You don't make as many neural pathways. You're not as nimble. You're not as capable. Too much of this, and you really start seeing people in a place where they're not functioning very well. They literally start to see degradation in gray matter in some cases. So the answer is there's a sweet spot, like just about anything else.
You gotta swap up the games all the time, otherwise you get bored. It can't be the same game every
Right.
day. That's
Which
the
is
problem.
exactly why DeepWell stepped in and did what it did. Imagine if every time you made a game for FDA clearance, you needed $3 to $30 million to get it cleared, and you needed 3 years to do it. That's what it takes if you don't have the thing that we just did. So that's why we had to get in the middle of that, because I completely agree with you. They're not therapeutic if you're playing the same thing all the time. If you're not engaged, if you're not dopaminergic at that right level we're talking about, it's not going to work. And I don't care how good the game is, it's not going to be that good if you're doing it for a year. And then you've seen that fundamental thing. If you look at someone like Achille and the Endeavor RX that they put out, there's many fail points on it. One thing was they couldn't do what game developers like to do, which is iterate on the game loop, because it was all stuck. But the other thing is they made one game. Everybody's like, why are you making one game? And their answer was, because it took $30 million and 8 years to make this one. So we can't, and that was that fundamental disconnect I was talking about. You can't ask games to come in here and do the heavy lift on mental health that they're capable of doing if you try to treat them like a medical device. You got to regulate them like a game.
Talked about a lot of stuff. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today? I think
no, man.
Great discussion. I feel like part of this was just me watching the kind of video I'd be watching on YouTube anyway. So
no, it was a lot to get out, and I really appreciate you guys. It's a little bit of a hard concept to understand, but at the base level, you take what DeepWell's done. The big announcement is we've got this kernel, and when you attach it to media, it becomes a medical device, and as a result of that, it's going to get access to new monetization, and that's going to change why you make these games. And I think it's taken us back to the golden age of game. People are going to make really, really good games, really, really great loops. And they're not going to be saying to myself, what's the economy here? How am I, and spend more time designing the monetization than they do designing the game.
Yes. Oh, that's the scourge of the gaming world. And I'm excited that someone's fighting back right now. So of course, we're going to make sure there's links in the comment description down below in case you want to learn more, if you want to get in contact with DeepWell, or just follow what's happening here, because it's exciting to hear that people could be getting funding based on actually making a game help people instead of it trying to steal their wallets. So thank you.
Yeah, and the one that helps you is just a great game. It's we're not talking about serious games. They're getting paid just to make stuff that we're going to love.
I love it.
Yeah. That's the thing. Having fun is the most important part when you're playing games.
There's no question. That play loop is everything. There's a whole series of science that just shows, and this is probably a great way to end. When we're in our greatest learning periods, that we'll say like 1 to 5, right? We don't make learning your alphabet or learning to walk or learning socialization work. We make it a game. What's that dopaminergic hit for your children? The smile on your face, especially mom's face. If you measure a kid who's in that moment, you smile at that kid and they're like, yeah, they'll like get up and try to walk on wobbly legs and run into the coffee table. They will sit there and practice letters and numbers to see you light up that they've got it, right? And then somewhere around 5, they don't get as entrained on your face anymore. They're starting to get socially kind of more, outwardly facing, having birthday parties and wanting to have friends. But also we change as parents. We start thinking, oh, you're going to go to school here. We're going to teach you now how to work hard, play hard. And every part of that is broken. If we could turn school into something that feels like a game, and is one, I don't mean rocket math. Really, you're playing through life, right? The more you play through life, the better you are. And that's why people who love their jobs kick butt at them, right? And that's why, the folks that if you're in love with a sport, if you're Kobe Bryant, why do you play better than everybody else? Completely in love with that. Couldn't stop. Felt great doing it. And that's allows us to drive through. We don't really have that much ability to do the things we don't want to do. None of us are good at it, really. So that's what's amazing here is when you love it, you do it. And when you do it, you get amazing at it really fast.
Amen. I've got to say, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I think it's expanded all of our minds a little bit and shown us some different sides of gaming. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate it. I really enjoyed watching the whole cat thing go on there. That's a deep relationship you have with that cat there.
This is my other therapy. Both of them have been here bothering me this entire episode. But if you're out there,
the best is when they're on both things, and you see the same cat go from one video to the other video.
She thinks I'm her mom. She thinks I'm licking her, and it's better than actually licking her because that is just hairy.
That's a voice of experience right there.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you're out there listening, you're like, what the heck are they talking about? I guess you got to come watch us here on YouTube, see some of the stuff that's going on, see some of the shots of Zengence and everything else too. But remember, we're here for you on every major podcast platform. We're here for you on YouTube. And if you've been thinking about VR and you're like, oh, but it's a waste of time, it's gaming. No, it's not. It's healthy. It's good for you. And check out Zengence, and that'll make you feel even better. So thank you for being with us tonight. And remember, if you're thinking about VR, it's time. Just dive on in.
Dive on in.
That's right.